Welcome to City and State TV. I'm Executive Editor Michael Johnson. I'm joined today by David Ehrenberg, the President and CEO of the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
And it was we wanted to have you in because we are doing an event at your facility, Brooklyn Navy Yard, for our Brooklyn Special issue, which is coming out in a couple weeks. And we thought that the location was someplace that we wanted to go because of all the development that's been going on there. You have a lot of projects working. The mayor's invested a lot of money in there too. Before we get into the specifics of that, just talk about the energy that's going on there, and you know, it must be a great place to come to work every single day.
Absolutely, it's a dream job for me. I grew up in Brooklyn, and being able to work at a not-for-profit like the Brooklyn Navy Yard, which is able to create large numbers of jobs and individual projects because we have such a large property, we have such impressive buildings, such impressive tenants, while also remaining focused on Brooklyn and even more locally, the immediately surrounding communities, is for me a dream job. You know, there's a lot of energy at the Navy Yard. There's a lot of energy in Brooklyn in general, and we like to think that we are kind of at the heart of the Brooklyn Renaissance and kind of leading the way in how to do that, both in creating a lot of economic activity at the Yard, while also creating a lot of economic opportunity for local residents.
Interesting. What struck me when I was kind of prepping for this, I was looking through it, and it seems like the growth has accelerated very quickly here, and you took over in 2013, September 2013.
That's right.
You're seeing a lot of these projects coming in, and I know that the mayor announced back in November the $140 million investment to retrofit Building 77.
Yep.
Is this kind of like just a quick surge that's happening now, or is this something you see as a trend? You think this is going to develop very, very quickly, the rest of it? Because there's a lot of land still to be developed in the Navy Yard.
We certainly don't see it as a one-off. You know, the history of the Yard since the Navy moved out, I think, can be kind of summarized in 4 different periods. Immediately after the Navy moved out, and for many, many, many years, just outright decline, where you fell from employment in the 10 to 15,000, down from an all-time high of 70,000 people who worked at the Brooklyn Navy Yard during World War II. And you fell at its lowest point when I was growing up in Brooklyn to a couple hundred people working at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And for your viewers' understanding, the Brooklyn Navy Yard is about half the size of Prospect Park, or a third of the size of Central Park. So having 100 or 200 people working on a property that size is devastating for what was devastating for the borough and the immediately surrounding community. You then went through a period of stabilization and revitalization of our existing buildings, where industry started returning to New York, and we had employment increases that brought us to the point where we are right now of about 7,000 people working at the Yard. That took us 50 years to get through. We see over the next 5 to 10 years doubling employment, if not more. We believe that in about 5 or 6 years, it will be 15 to 20,000 people working at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And that's really on the strength of the last 5 projects that have recently been announced. And I certainly believe that the Yard's best days are in front of it, and the strength of Brooklyn, the strength of the Brooklyn workforce, and the fact that we have so much more development opportunity at the Yard is extraordinarily exciting. For us, it's really about how do you do that development in a way that maximizes the impact for the local community in terms of the number of jobs and the quality of jobs, and then also ensuring that those jobs are available to local residents.
Interesting. Let's talk about the project specifically a little bit. The Building 77, I know you're going to retrofit that building, and you're looking for a marquee tenant to take the top floors of that building. You know, where's that process at? Have you started to receive some bids? Is there any specific maybe industries you're looking? Do you have to go out and try to recruit these people?
So that project we have broken ground on effectively, although it's a restoration of our largest building. It's 1 million square feet. So the largest building at the Yard will be one of the largest industrial buildings in the city when we're done with it. It's now fully scaffolded, and windows are coming out and going to be replaced in the near future. So it's actually really starting to happen, and it's quite an exciting time at the Yard. We are looking right now for a tenant for the top 2 floors of that building. Those 2 floors have extraordinary views out over the harbor, over Manhattan, a beautiful roof deck, and we're looking for a marquee tenant that would anchor the industrial cluster that we have developed at the Navy Yard. Who exactly that will be is to be determined. But we're working with a broker right now, looking for a tenant who will not only pay rent, but also will bring a large number of jobs, but also be beneficial to the other industrial companies that are in the yard right now, so that we can maximize the partnerships and the synergies that already exist at the yard. And that's something that really is important at the yard, and that we take very, very, very seriously. The fact that our woodworkers partner with our metal workers, who partner with our technology and design companies, and through all of these developments, we're trying to maximize that effect, because that's why people live and work in New York City. You bump into people, you form partnerships that you would never expect, and the next great thing comes about.
Interesting. I know another project you have going on is this Dock 72 deal that kind of just got announced, and they're going to anchor that with WeWork. If people aren't familiar with it, it's essentially a company that brings together a bunch of small companies, creates a collaborative space where everyone can work together. Is that a separate kind of approach that they're doing there? That's going to be so like Building 77. You're looking for an industrial partner to work with, like some of the traditional people that are the people you already have there.
Right.
This is a completely different thing. This is the creative section, but it's going to be, you're not looking for like a creative person to go into Building 77.
So many of our companies are certainly very creative, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the manufacturing and industrial companies that have thrived at the Navy Yard are both manufacturing and industrial companies and technology companies and design companies. We have the top printing company in the world, perhaps, in Dugal Digital Solutions, that they're a heavy manufacturer, but they're also a design and technology firm, for sure. That said, Building 72, Dock 72, it's a slightly different approach to economic development. In Building 77, we and the city and the de Blasio administration are investing $140 million of Brooklyn Navy Yard money, partner money through tax credit programs and things like that, as well as funding from the administration. On Dock 72, we're leasing the land to private developers who are in fact paying us rent that will go back to the development corporation to help us do our next rounds of development. And they're building the building. We are not putting any money into the building, into the site, into the basic infrastructure. It's all on them. They will be anchored by WeWork, which is a small business incubator, and we expect that space will be home to hundreds and hundreds of small businesses. For us, those businesses, many of them will presumably fail, as small businesses unfortunately sometimes do. Some of them will succeed, and we expect that some of those will become the next great employer at the Navy Yard. They will also be leasing the rest of the building to creative design and technology firms that, again, we believe will be helpful for the cluster of industrial and manufacturing companies that we have there. That project also, it should be noted, is developing 4,000 jobs in and of itself. So in the last 12 years, the Navy Yard's added about 3,500 jobs. In this one building will be more than exceeding that, and every job in that building will be a living wage job. The developers made a commitment that not just the employees of the developer, but all of their tenants will be paid a living wage. And that's something that the de Blasio administration has made a real priority in the economic development world. And the development partners in Boston Properties and Rudin were great partners in making sure that we could accomplish that.
So as you develop this area out, how do you decide kind of what you're going to let come in, what you're going to like as you plan it out? Because clearly there's an industrial center there. There's a history of shipbuilding and ship repair, but there's also this kind of new age stuff that you want to bring in. So as you kind of bring it together, what's your I guess overarching theme or goal as you look at the area?
So I would say that we approach this in two ways, and the simple answer is there's no simple right answer, and balance is perhaps the most common word used at the development corporation, and we're constantly trying to balance a lot of different things we're trying to accomplish. That said, we have remained very true to the existing tenants at the Yard. That's represented in the fact that 95% or so of our leasing activity is renewals of our existing tenants or expansions of those tenants. We think that's extraordinarily important because, unfortunately, right now, given the real estate market in New York, finding that kind of stability for industrial and manufacturing companies is extraordinarily difficult. Many of them are being priced out of a lot of neighborhoods around the city, and those who aren't are being offered very short-term leases because their landlords, not unsurprisingly, are looking at what's coming down the pipe, and New York and Brooklyn in particular is extraordinarily hot. Mm-hmm. not getting long-term leases, if you're an industrial company, that's very difficult. It becomes very difficult to invest in your company, in your equipment, and your people. And we, as a mission-driven landlord, work very hard to make sure that we're providing the safe haven, the safe harbor in the storm, as it were, for our companies. That's something we take very, very, very seriously. That's important for us, not just to stabilize the companies, but most importantly to stabilize the employees of the companies and their families, right? When you destabilize a company, really what you're doing is destabilizing dozens and dozens of families around Brooklyn. So while we are remaining true to our existing tenants, we are also embracing the economic development and the talent resurgence that's happening around New York and Brooklyn. And we see a very bright future in manufacturing and industrial firms in New York, because I believe that as technology begins to creep into everything we do in life, that the intersection between design, technology, manufacturing, media, fashion, and wearables, all of that will continue to accelerate, and a lot of that will happen in New York, because technology is no longer about technology, it's no longer about computer and software, it's about fashion, it's about product design, it's about online security, and a lot of that will naturally happen in New York. And what's important for us is that a lot of that will then have manufacturing associated with it. So wearables and things like that, we see a very bright future.
Interesting. And I know part of this balance too is obviously very commercial, very industrial. There's a little bit of retail as well that's kind of getting involved in this too. And obviously the opening of Wegmans is a huge, exciting thing for you guys. As someone who went to school in upstate New York, I'm very excited about Wegmans as well. So what I guess where is that? Do you think that it's going to stay mostly industrial, commercial, and I think a little bit of retail is the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Wegmans site, the Admiral's Row site, was a site that we worked for many, many, many years, if not decades, with the local community to first of all get it back from the federal government. We only got it back from the federal government about 5 or 6 years ago. And through that process, developed the vision of what would go on that site. That site is pretty different than the rest of the Navy Yard, where on the ground floor, what you have is industrial uses. And that's extremely important to us, because the ground floor is the best manufacturing and industrial space because of the loading, and you don't have to go in elevators and all that kind of stuff. So we certainly, the retail component of Admiral's Row is going to be isolated to Admiral's Row for our future. It's important to note that Admiral's Row also is generating 120 to 200,000 square feet of additional light industrial space that we will get from the developer, and we'll be able to then lease back out to the kind of standard small light industrial companies that have found a home at the yard. So it's not, Admiral's Row is not just retail.
Good. A couple more things I wanted to talk to you about: the sustainability goals that you guys have with the buildings. I know that you guys have said that any new building is going to be LEED Silver certification, which is leadership in energy and environment design. What was that a push by the De Blasio administration, the Bloomberg administration before that? Is that coming from them, or is that something that
No, that's something that the administration is certainly very supportive of that. It also comes directly from us and the vision for the Navy Yard as the preeminent sustainable urban manufacturing hub in the country. It's also frankly very important for our tenants, who many of our tenants, their own companies are green. It's something that's important to their clients and customers, and they are looking for a landlord who shares their values, and vice versa. We're looking for tenants who share our sustainability goals as well.
Interesting. I know there's a couple of exciting things you guys are planning, rooftop gardens and farms up there.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that initiative. I think it's something that people maybe aren't aware of and don't really think about. I mean, everyone has small gardens on the rooftops, but you're going to full out farms on top of this.
That's right. So on one of our buildings, we have the largest soil-based rooftop farm in the country. It's the Brooklyn Range. That is a fantastic project for us. It creates a lot of jobs and uses a space in the Navy Yard that normally wouldn't be particularly usable on a rooftop. It also diverts 1 million gallons of rainwater from the sewage system, which during storms, unfortunately the sewage system in New York sometimes overflows into the East River. The Brooklyn Grange diverts 1 million gallons of water out of that system, so reduces the prevalence of runoff into the East River.
Great. And I know that we talked about before this, you're starting to get some of the Hurricane Sandy relief money coming in, and you have some plans for that
That's
in
right.
the near future. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Sandy hit us pretty hard, not surprisingly being right on the waterfront, and hit our tenants hard as well. We have been working with the federal government and city since Sandy, and have started receiving the funding from FEMA to make critical investments in our infrastructure, primarily around our electrical distribution system, raising the substations out of the floodplain, and also if you draw a line around our waterfront on each of the piers, we have about 5 miles or so of waterfront. Some of that was damaged during Sandy. We're repairing that. And then we have a very active dry dock operator at the Navy Yard who repairs and maintains boats. The dry docks, where you can pull a boat in and effectively pump out all of the water and have a boat on dry land to do the below water repair and maintenance that's required. They're a great employer. They have a couple hundred employees, classic middle class manufacturing jobs. They were hit very hard as well because a lot of their infrastructure was below grade. All of that's being repaired as well. So, we're looking forward over the coming years to using that funding and our own funding to continue the sustainability, continue investments that we've been making, and continue to make sure that we're ready for the next storm if it ever were to come.
And before I let you go, you have this ambitious goal, and it seems like most things are moving towards this goal. What are the 1 or 2 things that you are get worried about, get concerned about? What are the concerns that you guys have to address as you bring in more people? Is there transportation concerns?
Yeah, so I think that is our topic of the day at the Navy Yard. Is we have now announced all these fantastic projects that will create thousands and thousands and thousands of additional high quality jobs for local residents, and now we've made our bed and we have to sleep in it.
Yeah.
And so we've actually, a year ago, knew that this was coming down the pipe, and started making investments and started doing a lot of work on those basic operations issues, that as we go from an employer or a place that houses 3,000 to 7,000 and then 15 to 20,000 jobs, how do we move all those people to the local train stations? How do we have enough food options for them? And those are investments that we're starting to make right now. We'll be coming out in the very near future with a really robust transportation plan that will link us very directly to the local train stations and subway system, bus routes and things like that. And so that's a lot of what we're spending our time on right now, is making sure that we're ready for all these new employees.
Okay. Well, we'll keep our eyes out for that. David Ehrenberg, thank you very much for joining us.
Great, thank you for having me.